we'll get started. Welcome to the Planning Committee. We've got a very short agenda this evening, which is unusual. We seem to get longer and longer, but we've only the one item this evening. So, can I just remind everybody that we are being filmed. It's standard procedure for this sort of committee. If any of the speakers this evening, the objector and the applicant, don't wish to be filmed, if they could just let us know, we'll make sure that you're not filmed. Everybody else has no choice but to be filmed. If the fire alarm sounds, it won't be a drill, so if we could all leave by the door to my right, and we'll await the fire service coming. So, we'll move on. Apologies for absence. Sean.
From Councillors Akhtar, Hazel Gloucester, Hudson and Leach.
Okay, thank you. I've not been given any urgent business to deal with. Are there any declarations of interest from the members for anything on the agenda this evening? No? Okay. Public question. We have received a public question. The questioner isn't here tonight, so what I'll do first, I'll read out the question and then I shall read out the response. The question is from Andrea Roberts, and the question is as follows. Dear Sean, re-meeting on Wednesday 22nd of August. This is my written request to ask a public question at the above meeting. My question is regarding 5 Williams Crescent, brackets, my next door neighbour. If a person or people request that a retrospective planning application is put to the planning committee for a decision rather than a planning officer, brackets of which there has been 3 regarding 5 Williams Crescent, within the requested time frame and to the contact listed by the council in the application on the online. I'm reading exactly as it's written, so please bear with me. This was requested by email, of which I've sent and receipt sent and logged, and the councillor contact does not request this for reasons unknown. Would this normally be up to the councillors to decide if they submit this request to the committee or not? Bearing in mind the amount of correspondence emails to and from planning and other relevant departments, 39 to date, this was not my understanding after reading the information on the OMBC website. I believe this to be a breach of my human rights and my right to express my concerns. Freedom of speech. Is this question allowed to be asked? My email address is overleaf and is the same address I've used throughout this correspondence. We obviously, the actual questioner is asking whether or not a member of public can ask for an application that was due to be dealt with by officers under delegated powers can actually be taken to this committee by a member of the public. So that's the gist of the question. The actual answer is that under the council's constituency, the current constituents, the council scheme of delegation only allows elected members to do this. This has been like this for many years, and at present the public can't themselves request that an application is taken from delegated powers to the committee. However, they can do that by requesting that a local elected member, so the local councillor does it. So the way to do that is to go through the councillors. There is a limitation on this because the council are ordered by the government under the UK planning legislation that 95% of applications are dealt with under delegated powers directly by the planning officers, and only 5% of all applications can come before the planning committee. So we're not unlimited in the amount that we can up, but we do always try to accommodate this. It's not likely that the scheme of delegation will change in the near future because we've got very strict targets to meet. Mrs. Roberts says that it's a breach of human rights and freedom of speech. Well, I wouldn't say it's a breach of human rights. There is a method to up applications to the committee, so there's no restriction on there. And of course, the freedom of speech, we're reading the question out. That's fine for everybody to hear. We will be sending a written response to Mrs. Roberts, and if she has any more questions, she's quite at liberty to ask myself or the planning officers. Okay, we will now move into the... Oh, I just need 2 minutes of the previous meeting. Are any members here who were at the previous meeting? Do we have any? Yeah. So can I have are we okay with the minutes? Yeah, okay. And we will now move into the applications, of which there is only one. We do have 2 speakers. We have an objector and an applicant. I'll be inviting the speakers to come up and address the committee shortly. Both speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the committee. When there's 30 seconds left, my colleague here will remind them, after which the members may wish to ask them questions. But before I do that, I'm going to ask the case officer to just run through the application for us, just to bring us fully up to date. Okay.
I'm doing it from this position because I like to show members some elements on the screen, and it's easier to identify that from this position. So as it says on the screen, this is an application, reserved matters application for 4 dwellings. Outline permission has already been granted for this development, so the principle of the scheme, the principle of housing on this site has already been established, and it's the reserved matters, the approval, the layout, the scale, that are for determination tonight. The members who were here in April will remember this application being before them at that meeting as well. You'll see in the report there's very little in the way of change of that. You'll note on one of the plans there's an indication of a waste bin collection area. Other than that, and some additional information which the applicant has submitted in support of their application following the previous reason for refusal. It's essentially the same scheme as dealt with last time. So the application was refused last time for 3 main reasons. Firstly, insufficient turning space being provided for large delivery and refuse vehicles to manoeuvre into and around the proposed site. Secondly, insufficient amenity space being available for occupiers of the new houses. And thirdly, increased overlooking and loss of privacy for adjacent residents.
That's incorrect.
So this is the application site. As you can see, it's originally the garden area of the bungalow, which you see the rectangle in the top right-hand corner of the site. Around the site, got existing residential development, the access coming from Manchester Road, and the area in blue has already got detailed approval for a new bungalow on that site. So this is the layout of the site. So 4 detached dwellings around the site, all served for single vehicular access. Little red blob that you can see adjacent to Manchester Road is the area for waste bin storage. It's a fairly common occurrence on cul-de-sacs or private driveways to have that arrangement. The access road itself, and again the concerns last time were about waste, refuse vehicles accessing the site and large delivery vehicles. In response to that, the applicant has spoken to the Council's Refuse Department, and they've confirmed that in these kinds of instances they would be unlikely to actually access the site. So the expectation will be that the waste lorry will stop at the bottom of the site, it will pick up the bins from there. And again, that's a pretty common arrangement for them to do. Clearly, any large delivery vehicles that come into the site, there's not room for them to manoeuvre around to turn in the site. But the frequency of those movements is going to be very limited. And again, this can be replicated on either of our cul-de-sacs, far bigger than that. But a large delivery vehicle coming down that site can't turn around. So what they do, they're aware of what the circumstances are, they make allowances for that, and they manoeuvre into the site accordingly. Smaller vehicles such as the supermarket delivery vans, there's certainly sufficient space for them there, even if they have to go onto the pavement's driveway to do that. The second reason was about amenity space around the houses. And obviously these are quite large buildings on the plots, particularly in light of some of the houses around the site, which have particularly spacious gardens to them. But each one of those plots has got at least 100 square metres of private screened amenity space with it. And that is pretty common for a modern detached house or one semi-detached house. You think about that as a 10 metre by 10 metre back garden. Again, when you go to appeal, inspectors look at those issues. And again, it's a matter of a person's choice. Some people don't want a large garden, they don't want the mowing of the lawn and so on. And they will say that so long as there's adequate space there, somebody will be able to sit outside, put the washing out and so on, that is considered adequate, not a reason to refuse an application. The final reason, or the first reason, because I did them in reverse order, was about the privacy and overlooking of neighbouring properties. And that's an element I'm going to run through now, just looking at each of these plots in order. So on the top left-hand side, this is plot 1, see potential implications on the houses that back onto the site on Manchester Road, and the bungalows that back onto the site on Dacres Drive. This is similar. So this is the back of the properties on Manchester Road, and then you go round to the bungalows on Dacres Drive. So you can see on that side there's existing screen fencing. In terms of the plans for this particular proposal, the way it's been laid out aims at ensuring that there's no overlooking of those gardens. So if we take this middle one, the front of the building, which faces into the site at the bottom, the back of the building faces towards Dacres Drive. One on the left-hand side is the ground floor, again screen fence on there. The first floor element of it, we've got 2 bedrooms there, both of which have got windows in that direction. We've also got some dormer roof, some roof lights, but again at a height where, as you stood on a stool, you're not looking down. Just to focus on those 2 windows, they are in fact that and that. So they've been providing there just to get some extra lighting, but they do not provide overlooking from the site. 2 middle areas, they're the sanitary accommodation, so they're 3 obscurely glazed. In terms of plot 2, down at the bottom end of the site, again, same sort of provisions have been made in the design to ensure that any window openings to habitable rooms are focused either on the front or the rear elevation, so they're not actually facing out of the site. And that's the boundary down the side, so we just come round from the front of the site into that. Again, the same arrangement would apply. So the elevation, the important elevation facing towards the bungalows is this side on the right. And again, the attempt has been made, so it's this area at the top, and all these windows, these secondary windows, obscurely glazed. So again, no overlooking from those, again, roof lights up at a height, where again, overlooking is avoided. Third property, plot 3, the bottom right hand corner, relationships of the properties on the close. Down to the southern side is the property 16, which is on a higher level, and then across to the east to these 2 properties is number 2, number 4. The separation distances from the conservatory to the back of 2 to the back of this site, 25 metres. From number 4 to the back of the site, 34 metres. Oldham doesn't have specific standards for these, but generally you'll find local authorities looking on the website where I used to work. 21 metres, 20 metres is deemed acceptable for overlooking windows. So in terms of that relationship, so that's looking towards those 2 properties, 2 and 4, across the garden. So any windows, there is a habitable room window facing that way, but at a distance well above the council's or the standards regarding apply. This is at the back end of the site on 16 New Sun Close. As you can see, the first element of that is that this property is at a higher level. Secondly, there is a line of trees on the side. Now these trees are not subject to a preservation order, so in theory they could be removed. But in terms of the way the layout has been devised and the relationship with existing houses, even if those trees weren't there, the separation distances and the lack of overlooking would meet any normal acceptable standards. So this is the relationship you can see on the top right hand side. That's where we're looking towards the existing property, and then down into the side. So you see in the middle at the top there, block 3, and then we'll move down to block 4. So that elevation is at a much lower level to start off with. As we look at the actual layout of this, so again, this is your first floor level. Ground floor, again, is much lower. First floor level, the back of the site. And that, when you look at it again, no overlooking windows coming in from that element. So we're here. So that's the view from 16 looking down at the side. Secondary windows all obscurely glazed to control by condition. Facing 2 and 4, again, there's in fact only one bedroom window in that direction, but as I've already explained, at a separation distance which is deemed to be acceptable. Block 4, finally, on the side. So this is the elevation that faces towards the boundary, the back of 149 Manchester Road. Again, this is the design of the building. This top of these plans is the important elevation facing towards that property. Ground floor, again there are windows in there. As you can see, there's a screen fence along that boundary. Permitted erosion rights would also allow that. That's probably at 1.8 metres, would allow that to be raised to 2 metres if anybody felt there was an issue with privacy on there. Middle elevation, again you can see there are windows in there to these 2 bedrooms. But both of those bedrooms also have secondary other windows. So there's one there facing into the side. There's one there which faces over the new bungalow on the front of the side. And because of the position of the roof of that bungalow, although there are views close to this property's boundary, that roof effectively obscures any views into either the new garden bungalow or the neighbouring property. So again, if we look at those elevations on there, this is the elevation facing 149. So again, in roof lights, but then you've got these 2 high-level windows and obscure glazing to other windows on the side. So in terms of the issues of potential overlooking of the site, we feel that the layout has overcome those issues, and that therefore, with those restrictions on there and the conditions that are in the reports, the conditions obviously, you don't want this being built, then all of a sudden the next thing with the permitted rights, those windows being enlarged, they would be capable of being controlled by condition. So I think we've essentially covered those elements of it. Just quickly want to just run through the other representations that have been made on the application. And there, senior members noticed those in the report. Firstly, there doesn't appear to be any changes to the proposed plans. As I explained, apart from the indication of the bin storage, it is essentially the same application that was dealt with last time. Invasion of privacy, loss of light. Privacy is essentially what I've just looked at. In terms of loss of light, again, you can see the relationships between these properties, even where there are neighbouring properties close by, they're either not directly in front or at a distance which is avoids any issues on that. Proposed development would detract from what is currently a peaceful and rural environment. I think that the main comment on that is that yes, this is on the edge of the urban area, but the site itself is actually confined within an existing urban site. Noise disturbance during construction, again, members will have come across this issue many times. It is a temporary problem in absolutely any development. It's not justification for refusing an application. Devaluation of properties, loss of existing use. Again, these are elements members have come across before, not material to consideration of an application. Concern about further trees being removed. Again, as I mentioned during the earlier part of the presentation, even if those trees were removed, separation distances would be well in excess of what is needed for privacy. Additional car journeys. The principle of development, as I said previously, established the highway engineer has raised no objections to the application on the basis of those numbers of car journeys from 4 additional dwellings. Local amenities being oversubscribed, not clearing, again, we're talking about a small development for dwellings, so in terms of schools, hospital, medical accommodation, and so on, the impact of that would be negligible from this small development. Represents open development of the site. That really is an issue for members on the basis of what you've seen in the representations that have been made in the other presentations you'll hear, just to decide whether that is a justification for refusal. And finally, back to the trees, inadequate screening from trees even when they've been laid. And that is the point here, that even with those trees, in the winter, there's no leaves on them, there will be clear view, but with adequate separation distances. So on the basis of that, the recommendation of the petition is in the report. It is recommended that members approve the application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll invite the 2 speakers up now. First of all, the objector, Val Robinson. Is Val here? Oh, I do apologise. It says Val here. So, Isabel, if you'd like to come to the front, Isabel. As I said previously, you've 3 minutes. We'll remind you when you've 30 seconds, and then the members may wish to ask you questions. So when you're ready, if you just press the button, the little red light will come on, and you can start. So when you're ready.
Okay. I represent local residents who are all adversely affected by the proposal. I spoke before this committee in April where an almost identical application was refused by the councillors on the grounds that the proposed development is overdevelopment and would cause increased overlooking and loss of privacy to adjacent residents, insufficient amenity space for the occupiers of the new houses and insufficient turning space for large delivery and refuse vehicles to manoeuvre into and around the proposed site. As such, the proposal was considered unsustainable development and contrary to Policy 9 of Oldham's joint DPD, which seeks to protect the amenity of existing and future residents, and Policy 4, which seeks to ensure highway safety. Whilst we acknowledge the applicant has considered the council members' concerns regarding the insufficient turning space regarding refuse vehicles and have attempted to rectify this problem by providing a bin collection area, no mention has been made with regards to the concerns regarding large delivery vehicles and their manoeuvres. Furthermore, we do not feel that the proposals in terms of the loss of privacy to adjacent residents and the insufficient amenity space available to occupiers of the new houses has been addressed, as the size, design and layout have not changed. They are the same designs as the previous application and are therefore still in contravention of Policy 9, and that the applicant has simply resubmitted the earlier application with no consideration being given to the members' concerns whatsoever. This is the 5th version of a similar scheme and does not address the fundamental negative issues which caused the earlier designs to be withdrawn as unacceptable by Oldham Planning Department and which were refused by yourselves and Saddleworth Planning Committee. Concerns still remain about the high-level windows and the obscure glazing, which are designed to protect the privacy of existing homeowners, which may be removed. Properties of this height would restrict the amount of natural daylight into the existing properties and would be particularly overbearing. The photographs shown didn't, we feel, accurately reflect the site. I did send some photographs into the last meeting, but those haven't been shown, and it's quite easy to show different aspects from where you stood on the side and how it affects different people, particularly the bungalows that
30 seconds.
would be affected. So the privacy and amenity of adjacent properties are adversely affected as a result of seriously deficient separation distances. The nearness and height combined would also seriously affect the living conditions of the homeowners surrounding the site, and also the amenity of possible future site residents would be affected due to the inferior garden provision, which for properties of this size is in direct conflict to Policy 11. We therefore continue to feel that this is a significant overdevelopment of a compact site, and that to site 4 large houses with 3 floors would result in unacceptable overbearing, loss of privacy and amenity, and would not be in keeping with the surrounding properties. We fully realise that some residential development will take place, and we are not against this, but it is the scale of the current proposals which continue to cause concern. Thank you.
Okay, have we any questions? Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Has any effort been made by the developer to consult, to work with residents on the properties?
No, we went to Saddleworth Planning Committee possibly 3 years ago, and the agent said then that the applicant wanted to work with the residents and that there would be a conversation at each space, but nothing's happened.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Chair and members, for allowing me an opportunity to speak before you tonight. Firstly, I would like to state that I agree with the recommendation of your professional officers that are contained within your report. An application on this site was refused at this committee in April. The applicant has pursued an appeal subject to that application. However, in the interest of addressing previous concerns and attempting to avoid the need to continue to pursue the appeal, this amended application has been submitted and is now before you at this committee. This application and the development proposed has the full support of your professional officers. Following further constructive and proactive discussions, the development is compliant with all relevant local and national planning policy. It is therefore kindly requested, based on the recommendation of your officers, that this application is permitted. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Murphy again. Yeah.
Similar question as to the objector. Have you made any effort to work with the residents to iron out any of the concerns? If not, why not?
We've had conversations verbally, and we did attend the parish council meetings. But at the end of the day, the developer is a developer, and it comes a point where you have to do the trade-offs between developing a site and making it profitable. You know, they're not doing this out of goodness of their hearts. And providing a scheme that works for this site, the scheme is quite simply compliant with policy, hence the support from the officers. So that's our view on that, yeah.
Okay. These are very nice houses. They'll be quite expensive in an area that has very expensive housing. I'm just wondering why, I think you've already answered it, why 4? 2 of these houses on there may have been far more attractive to buyers, and it will be their choice, of course. If they buy those houses and they've got small gardens, they will fully realise this. The people who move in here will obviously not be doing that other than anything from their own choice. However, 2 houses on there would have made an extremely attractive site. So, but putting 4 on, I feel, devalues those very nice houses in terms of, you know, limited space around them. That, I guess that would be a profit issue then. That's purely a financial decision.
It's partly a business decision, but also it's about responsible densities. We're in a housing crisis, and I think to build 2 houses on that site, which by the nationally accepted sort of density of normally about 30 dwellings per hectare, you'd get 6 on there. We've got 5. I think to build 3 would be, I think, irresponsible in terms of housing delivery, especially in a rural area like this.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No. Okay. Could you just turn the mic off before you leave? Thank you. Okay. We've heard the 2 speakers. It was refused at the last committee. I'm not sure how many of the current members were on that committee. I don't think everybody here was. And I said, in essence, this is exactly the same application that was considered previously. You've heard that there is an appeal currently running, but you mustn't let that cloud your decision at all. Treat this as a completely new application. So, up for debate. Yep, Garth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, although I wasn't on the committee last time, I was actually here for an application which I'd upped in my ward, and I heard the debate last time, and I know that Councillor McCann at the time and Councillor Hudson made quite a few comments about, and had raised similar concerns as the objector has today, and there's some questions about the topology and so on. I know the objector just said that the reason they've put this forward again is so that they don't need to go on with the appeal and to address the concerns. Well, apart from the bin, I can't really see any difference. So there is none of the concerns have been addressed. So out of the 3, I mean, you vaguely possibly argue that the highways issue concern may have been addressed to an extent, but pretty much everything else, which was refused for last time, still stands. So on that basis, I'd go for the, certainly policy 9 again, that we'd go for the same thing again, because that's what, a long debate was done last time, and the same issues still remain. And it is overdevelopment, and it's the same reasons again, I think.
Councillor Murphy, and then...
Apologies, Chair, I seem to be asking all the questions tonight. On Manchester Road, can I ask the traffic officer, on Manchester Road, is there currently parking restrictions outside 151? So that stretch of road where the ingress and the egress are going to be using, is the parking restrictions on that road, i.e. double yellow lines, anything like that?
There aren't currently at the moment, no. No.
So, if I may, Chair, putting our TRO hat on, has anything been considered in terms of that, as in forward thinking? Because highway code 10 metres from a junction, so I would hate for 151 and 10 metres that way to suddenly have parking restrictions because the users of the new development site are not going to be able to see because of parking. So has that been considered in your report?
There are no thoughts about the TRO at the moment. There are no intentions to introduce one because of this development, no.
Thanks, Chair. It's a similar question to the last member. They've moved the bins to the road to be picked up there. I don't know how busy that road is. Is it a busy road? Is it going to cause problems? And the other issue is if you've got other delivery vehicles going into the site and they've got to reverse out, is that going to cause an obstruction as well? Potential. Is it dangerous to do that? Have they looked at that?
With regard to the bin collection, even if that bin collection area wasn't shown on the drawing, that is probably the area that the bins would have been collected anyway, and it's also the area that the bins for the adjacent properties will be collected. So it's accepted all over the borough that that's what happens, and drivers wait for a couple of minutes, if that, behind and then the bin wagon continues. So that wouldn't have been a reason for refusal for me. I accept that there isn't enough turning within the site for large vehicles. I've assessed this application on the basis that it's for a very, very small development of 4 dwellings. There's adequate parking provision within the site, and any visitor or driver resident would be able to manoeuvre safely within the site and exit in a forward gear.
Thanks, Chair. Another one for the traffic officer, please. 3 to 4 bedroom properties. That looks to me as in there's driveway parking for 2 cars. So 3 to 4, my maths is struggling there, but I don't think there's enough parking provision. I know that might be the policy, but the reality of it is how many cars per household in realistic terms rather than what legislation says. So when you say adequate provision for parking and visitors, where will the visitors park?
So there are no national or local parking standards, so on every single application I assess the level of parking provision proposed and the surrounding areas. So on one small development like this, there may not be the need for 2 or 3 parking spaces per dwelling because there's room for them to be accommodated elsewhere. There are 3 spaces per dwelling. You've got 2 car parking spaces on the driveways, and there's a garage as well on these. And I completely accept that they're larger family homes, and there will be more than likely at least 2 vehicles per dwelling.
Thank you.
I'd just like to remind the members that sort of we keep having this conversation, and the facts of the matter are that in Oldham we have 1.2 cars per dwelling. Wendy's standard that she's talking about, she's asking for at least 2 spaces and a garage and various other things. These will be well over any position. If we're attempting to argue that this dwelling is not providing any cars, we simply have no evidence to support that based on the census information that we have about average car ownership and use in Oldham, and therefore I would strongly suggest that we don't go down that particular path, because we simply have no evidence to do that. Similarly, around the overlooking issue, I hope the members follow Graham's photographs as he went through each and every potential overlooking issue there, and clearly identified quite clearly why he felt that there wasn't that. If the members think that there is some overlooking and loss of privacy, clearly they will have to identify exactly what it is, because Graham, like I say, took you through in some considerable detail quite a lot of stuff around that. In terms of the amenity space, there's nothing extraordinary about the amount of amenity space being provided that. And obviously on the turning space issue, you've heard from the highways engineer that she doesn't think that there's much chance of looking at that. As a consequence of that, I'd ask the members to think very carefully about the previous reason for refusal and whether there are any sound grounds for that, because the members will know that obviously if we act unreasonably, there's a potential for the council to get into trouble at appeal around cost and things like that. Officers have taken you through each and every one of those reasons very, very clearly and suggested that there isn't any evidence. Clearly, if you think otherwise, then clearly if you're coming to that view, then you must be very clear what actual evidence that you have to indicate why there's a problem. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any more? Anything else on the no? Okay. There are a number of issues. Steve's just gone over some things I was going to mention. Some of the things that the objectors have mentioned, we really couldn't defend at appeal at all. And it's unfortunate that, because if you look out, I've been to site and looked at the angles, and it does look as though these houses are quite tall. It looks as though they would actually block out well, they'll certainly block views out, that's a given, but it's a very hard fact of UK planning law. It's not Oldham's law, this, but the UK planning law doesn't give you any leeway on views. You've no right to a view, and devaluation of properties is not a consideration either. But when you look at the angles, you'll see that blocking of light, this just would not happen here, and it'd be very difficult for us to prove that it would and defend it on those grounds. There's a lot, they are big houses, aspiration houses, a type of houses we'd like to encourage more in Oldham, so we can bring this type of property and the people who live there into the town to increase increase the diversity of the area, bring these more desirable properties on. And as I've mentioned to the applicant there, I would personally feel far more comfortable with two houses on there, because you have two extremely attractive dwellings there that were both large in a lovely place, plenty of space around them. But the applicant also then went on to mention densities, and he's quite correct. The government are forcing increased densities on these developments. We have absolutely no way to defend against that. However, I think there may be a way to defend such a stance in this because of the type of properties and the location. But I can't see any other way that a refusal could be defended here at all. And it's already up for, well, it's already gone to appeal, and if we do let it go to appeal and we lose it, some of the conditions that the officers have put in there could be taken away from us. So it's a tightrope that we're walking here, and you need to consider very carefully how we deal with it. Now, I don't think there's any more contributions from the members, but it has been moved for refusal again by Councillor Harkness. Is that correct? Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Murphy? So it's been moved and seconded for refusal. So we need to take... yeah, Alan, could you give us your standard advice at this point?
Yes, Chair, just to reiterate the point that you've heard earlier, if you are going to refuse this application against officer advice, you must do so for valid planning reasons, and in the event of an appeal, you must be prepared or able to provide evidence to substantiate those reasons, because if not, there's a strong possibility that the applicant would be awarded costs for unreasonable behaviour, in that the council hasn't been able to substantiate its reasons for refusal on valid planning grounds. Thank you.
With that in mind, Dave, did you want to?
Yeah. To add my reasons for recommending refusal. I think I would struggle with the increased overlooking, as you rightly say, the insufficient turning space for providing large delivery and refuse vehicles. I would struggle with them. But I just think that the applicant has maximised the space of the area. You say 2, I'd probably go as far to say 3 I'd have been happier with, but with a provision for overspill parking. So my view for refusal would be the amenity being available for occupiers of new houses, because I just think that 1.2 car spaces is a nonsense. You'll struggle to find any 0.2 car out there. I am mindful that there is garage spacing, and if members were to be minded to, other members will be minded to move approval. One of the conditions that I'd like to see is that garage could never be turned into a front room. You know, like when you see a garage that is being converted to a front room and they actually lose that space. So if other members were mindful to agree with this and disagree with myself and my colleague, it'd be nice if that condition was put in place, that it could never be turned into, so you've always got that option of getting a car off the drive. Thank you, Chair.
That condition could easily be put in. But I just want to, we've been given the warnings by the legal people, which are absolutely right, and we all know that local authorities' planning powers are being hobbled drastically at the moment, and our ability to deal with things like this are getting more and more difficult. The odds are stacked against us every day. So we have to be mindful of that, because we also, well, we have a responsibility to make the right decision on this and to try and appease both the objectors and the applicants. We also have a responsibility to the other council taxpayers of the borough that we don't incur thousands of pounds in costs for unreasonable decisions at this committee. So having said that, you've mentioned something about overspill car parking. I'm not sure that's something we could reasonably defend, but what I feel would be reasonable for the people who have moved in second refusal to say is that there are serious concerns about the highway safety here, but we know that the highway safety officer's saying that that's not correct. However, we feel otherwise. The committee does feel there's a potential, and I feel there's a potential for difficulties at that junction, and by increasing reducing the number of dwellings and increasing the number of spur lands, we're alleviating that, and I think that is a reasonable stance to take. The principal houses on there is established, and at some point something will be built there. But if the members feel that 4 is unreasonable, the reasons that Councillor Murphy's given and those considering the other points there about concerns about alleviating potential issues on the corner and increasing the amenity of two or three extremely desirable dwellings, I think that is not an unreasonable stance to take. But I'll leave that to the members now. So it's been moved and seconded for refusal against officers' recommendations. Yes. Alan, yes.
Just before members vote, can you just clarify exactly what the reasons for refusal would be, so that members are quite clear? Because I know Councillor Murphy suggested that he doesn't support all of the reasons that were given last time. So members need to be aware of exactly what the reasons for refusal are that they're being asked to vote on.
Yeah, policy 9, which seeks to protect the amenity of... Hold on a minute. Well, you've got policy 4. You could argue policy 9 and 4 to ensure highway safety by requiring appropriate safety measures and schemes are implemented as part of the development process. So I know it's been here before, but we are looking at the 3 reasons before us, with the refuse truck and the delivery vehicles. So I'm struggling to object to the overlooking and loss of privacy. So that one,
I think we're basing it around the amenity issues, aren't we? Around policing that. Just so we don't just 1 second, if you'll indulge us. Graham, do you just want to say a few words on that?
Yeah, obviously, as you're looking at the reasons last time, so obviously we had those 3 different reasons. So the basis of those was, and I think this is part of members' concern, the proposal is overdevelopment of the site that results in. The first one of those that was up is increased overlooking and loss of privacy to adjacent residents. Now, I'm getting the impression that you're probably satisfied now with the restrictions that we're putting on there in the relationship, that is not a reason you would want to refuse the application at the moment. Is that correct? It's the first one. So overlooking and loss of privacy.
Sorry, if I'm Chair. I'm happy with the response from the officers on the first one of overlooking and loss of privacy. I'm happy with that. I believe it's been addressed. And as the Chair has mentioned, we would struggle with that anyway. So I'm happy with that one.
Okay. And on the second reason, which is the one that obviously you're focusing on, which is insufficient amenity space being available for occupiers of the new houses. I think that's an element that you have the concerns about. That's okay. The third reason last time was the insufficient turning space being provided for large delivery and refuse vehicles to manoeuvre into and around the proposed site. Well, obviously, it's already been explained.
Yeah, I accept that. I accept that response.
Wouldn't do that. obviously you've mentioned there the delivery vehicles as well.
Yeah, I accept your recommendations and your response for the delivery truck issue. Mine one was the insufficient parking space for visitors and homeowners alike. My concerns of overspill onto the highway, and then in a year's time, my colleague, Councillor Bashforth, we see this at TRO because it's causing some extra dramas that we could have dealt with at this planning committee. So when I say that there's four developments on there, if there were 3 on there, or as 2 has been mentioned, you could combat that issue of overspill, and I wouldn't be worried too much about overspill onto Noonsun Close and Manchester Road, although I would still have concerns about ingress and egress into the site, because the traffic officers mentioned that there isn't double yellow lines on there. So we're going to see that at TRO.
Yeah,
so this is the safety concern.
And what you're actually saying in layman's terms, because don't forget we are not, as we're often reminded, we are not professional planners. We are here to represent the people. We do pick up some knowledge over the years, but we don't have the full. But what you're trying to say there, Councillor Murphy, is that by reducing the number of properties on this site, we would alleviate potential future problems that we have experienced with regards to highway. So issues about possibly 24 bins at the end of that road having to be put out and collected on a busy road can be alleviated because there'll be room on site. There may be room for turning vehicles on site, we don't know, but that's a possibility. There would also be more room for visitors and occupants of there. They would enjoy larger space, and it wouldn't appear as a densely packed area. All those things, I believe personally, are reasonable issues and reasonable reasons to tie into Policy 9. So I think the officers are trying to push us here now, but that's where we'll stop at this point in time. So the reasons for refusal are based upon amenity and basically around now there is an element of highways in there, but we're not directly addressing that. So we're trying to take it off the street and avoid those issues that we come across so many times in existing areas where this has become a problem. So again, I'll say it again, it's been moved and seconded for refusal. The reasons are as we've discussed at length now. So can I have a show of hands for refusal? Against? Sorry, I saw an hand go up at late. So this is for refusal. 6 against, 2. Okay. So Alan, can you just add? We don't need to take another vote now. No, that's it. So the application is refused. What I would say, there is an appeal going through. So we will need somebody to defend this if it goes to. I'd be quite happy to defend it, Councillor Murphy. Okay, so you put me down, but if I can't do it, Councillor Murphy will do it. And it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that we do actually refuse that. But I'm quite confident that it cannot be in any way seen that we've been unreasonable about this. So I'm quite comfortable with that. So that is the decision on that. That is actually refused at the moment. Something will come at some point. There's going to be building on there. Hopefully it'll be a lot less than what we've seen there. So that's the end of the committee for today. Only one, but it's been an hour nearly. So thank you for that. Can I just ask members, we've gone on about appeals tonight, to note the appeals at the back of the thing. And once again, we've got an excellent result with only one appeal being upheld, and we've won all the others, which is, although we might not always see eye to eye with the officers, they generally get it right. So thank you. Councillor Murphy. Yeah.
Can we, I'm sorry, as that condition of it going through?
We can't now.
Right, okay.
We've lost